Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Art of Life podcast. Today we have lovely Leah with us, and she is joining us all the way from New Zealand. She is going to talk about our relationships and sex in general because she is a psychologist. She is also a sex and relationships expert. So, all the questions that we have about bed, all the questions that we have about love life, those we can bring on today. So, welcome, Leah. Thank you for joining us today for a beautiful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Kanika. It's a joy, and I always love to talk about those topics.
So, just to get us started, how did you get into all of this? Why did sex become such a big thing? And more importantly, for our listeners, is it a very big deal in relationships?
You know, I've answered this question so many times. And when you said, why is it such a big deal? I thought it was never a big deal for me, So this is such a good alternative way to approach answering it. But I was lucky to grow up in a sex positive family. My dad, particularly, was very much determined to make sure that I don't grow up with shame and guilt around those topics. And as every child would ask questions, I'm certain that I did too. And he just gave me a matter of fact kind of answers, no questions like, where did you hear this? Or judgments like, you don't need to know this, you're too young, or anything like it. He just answered as a matter of fact at a like stage appropriate level. So if, say, I was 5 years old and I asked, where do babies come from? He wouldn't lie about a stork or something. He would just say, well, again, that's back in the days. He would just say, well, when a man and a woman want a child, the man would give a seed to the woman, they'll plant it in her belly, and then the belly would grow and the baby would be in there. And that's how babies are made. So to a 5-year-old, I didn't, need to know about vaginas and penises and all these things, but I knew still the reality of it, in a very dumbed down fashion.
But that's what we need to do with kids, and we
Yeah.
need to empower them with the truth that they need to know at that stage. So well done to him. Yeah.
Exactly. And my mom gave me a book when I was like 10 or 11 years old about the female body, and it contained everything from puberty to old age, from pleasure and the clitoris to cancers, growth around the ovaries, and all of these things. So by the age of 12, I was pretty much the sexpert in my friends group and in the neighborhood, etc. And sex was never a big deal for me exactly because of that. I never felt that, oh, this topic, But a lot of my friends did feel that because they weren't that fortunate to grow up with sex positive parents that gave them the resources to learn. And I became that go-to person for a lot of people. And when I was a teenager at 14 years old, a non government organization came to my school. They held a talk about domestic abuse and human trafficking. And I was absolutely astonished that for the first time in my schooling career by this point, I learned something about real life in school. And it wasn't even delivered by the school. I was like, wow, I want to know more about these things. And they invited us to their youth club. And they used to take us on like 5-day trips where we'll sit in circles and talk about how power works, how toxic relationships develop, how to recognize abuse, what is peer pressure. So it
Oh,
kind of gave
wow.
me a really good, solid understanding of those things. Also, like how to protect yourself, how to have like safe words and even conversation lines with friends and family to alert them if something is wrong in a non-conspicuous way so that they understand that you are in trouble and you need help.
Wow. And how old were you then?
14.
Wow. So this is pretty good learning because even if your family had been open in terms of talking about sex, it's still a very good age because, yes, we can be open, but there's still just the act of sex, doing it for the first time and taking your clothes off. Like there's just different feeling with that. Even if you're not feeling ashamed, there's definitely awkwardness and so on. So it's very good to learn that very early on and to learn about toxicity in relationships and the power that sex can play.
Yeah. Honestly, the whole awkwardness that's there for a lot of people when it came to sex wasn't there for me. I was like, it's a normal thing people do, you'd have dinner, you'd have sex. It's a bodily need. Why be ashamed of it? There are hundreds of reasons why people have sex, and that's actually documented by research dating a few years back. And only one of them is reproduction. So for the most part, we do not have sex for reproduction. Definitely not when you're, I don't know, like a teenager or a young person, or even in your 30s and you're still paying extortionate amount of rent, and you're like, can I afford a cat, not to mention a dog or a person to bring into the world? I did not feel awkward about those things. I was very like open to it, and had a healthy idea of what it is and how seriously to take it. What's serious
Yeah.
about it? What's fun about it?
So did that shape you then, taking this up as a career? What really prompted you?
Um, Being in the organization as a youth member, they used to send us to town center with bags full of condoms, and for World's AIDS Day to raise awareness and all these things. I fell in love with that kind of preventative work and the psychology of it all. And I decided at age 14, that's what I want to do. I want to become a psychologist. And although a lot of people in my friends group and even strangers used to tell me, you have to become a sexologist. I was like, nah, sex is not a big deal for me. Like, why? But psychology, that's way more interesting. But after working, like I studied psychology and counseling and worked in mental health in the UK, I got really disillusioned with how things are. And I went traveling for a year around Europe. And during that time, I still kept getting calls from people from like over a decade ago asking me, like, hey, Leah, I have this issue with my boyfriend, my girlfriend. Can you help me, etc.? And I was like, okay, like I need to listen to what people want of me and what I'm good at. And that's why I started my private practice. It was like too many things aligned that I was like, I can't ignore this anymore.
Yeah.
People trust me, open up to me. I got to do something with this.
So generally, what are the bigger problems that people are coming to you with? Like, what is the most common one or two issues that people really have and they're wanting help?
When it comes to sex, usually is interpreted oftentimes as a mismatched libido or something like this. And I'm like, oftentimes it's not a matter of libido, it's how you actually navigate your sexuality and how your partner navigates your sexuality and theirs. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes, if we're to gender things a little bit, because it helps, women feel like they're not very sexual, that they are not interested in sex.
Because societally conditioned that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And because life is too busy, life of a woman is too busy. You have so much to take care of, and you are way more in demand socially and physically in terms of your labor than men are usually, right? And you get exhausted. And when do you have the time to think about sex?
You
Is
know,
this,
I'm
part of
an
it?
energy coach. So the other thing that I find especially is that the feminine energy as such, and we all carry our feminine and masculine energy, but the divine feminine energy is very settled. It's very laid back. It's very much like, it's like magnetism. That's why a lot of women in their favorite time, they just want to sit down. Even if they're not mums yet, even if they're not that busy, they want to sit down. They want to go have a massage. They want to read a book. They want to color. Like those are general female settling down activities. And men want to go out, do something physical. For men, if they want to solve a problem, they'll go like, okay, what can I do? How can I just get fit in the body? They'll actually want to run out and so on. So it's just different styles. So yeah, they women, I think in the world, they tend to get more tired, and plus their general energy, bulk of the feminine energy is also a lot more where they just want to sit down and relax.
I can definitely see that, but I also see cultural differences in all of that, because specifically in the West, women are not encouraged to go outdoors and conquer the world and stuff like that. And also it depends where you live. For instance, having lived in Bulgaria and then in the UK and now in New Zealand, I find that in the UK it's so much more difficult to get yourself out of the house because of the weather. And people en masse suffer from social anxiety and struggle. And they're more likely to cancel on plans that you've made like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago or 6 months ago in the last minute. And that's also cultural. And when I'm here in New Zealand, people are way more like get out in nature, socialize. There are a few people that since I've been here, I've made friends with. And anytime that I said, do you want to go do something? And they're like, yeah, what? Boys and girls, they're like, yeah, what? And they're very active, especially the female friends that I have here. They're always like, let's go kayaking, let's go on a hike, let's go blah. And I'm like, these
Yes.
women just like, how?
No, but that is so true. That's also because how I suppose the work environment is
Yeah.
in Australia and in New Zealand as well, because by the time, and UK, yes, I understand weather might be a different story, but in both of these countries, because there's a big focus on family life as such, people really want to get out and do things and they're more fit and so on. And I definitely didn't mean that women are like not wanting to connect out and do things in the nature, but in general, a woman's way is more like she's more ready to receive and she wants to be pampered.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I get
Whereas
that.
Whereas a man feels very fulfilled in general when he's providing, when he feels useful to the people he
Mhm.
loves.
Yeah. So back on the question is that kind of one of the things with couples when it comes to sex is this: how do you organize your life so you can actually fit in connection to yourself, connection to your body? Because a lot of women are very disconnected from their bodies. That's another thing that I'm seeing a lot of. Because a lot of the time, women suffer from a lot of pain through their lives because of periods, endometriosis, other health conditions, autoimmune disease, because again, we put ourselves last on the list and we're gaslit by you know medical organizations and institutions to believe that all of that pain is in your head. So we actively disconnect from our bodies. How are you to even sense and feel into your body when half of the time you're trying to avoid feeling that pain, feeling that discomfort?
Yeah.
And it's
You
very
can't be
difficult.
disconnected and connected.
Exactly. A huge amount of women are absolutely disconnected from their bodies for a huge portion of their week for various reasons. Maybe they're mothers and their bodies now are providing body for someone else or for X amount of children. Maybe it's, endometriosis or something else and they want to disconnect from the pain. So they live in their head, they disregard the pain, they just pop in pills. And when you're that disconnected, desire is not going to come knocking on your door, not that easily. And the other thing is like female arousal is a little bit more difficult to detect. And if you spend a lifetime disconnecting from your body, guess what? You're not going to detect when you're physically aroused by something. Whereas men, it's way more visible for them and they are taught to experience the world through their bodies. Men also are more of a kinesthetic or practical learner when it comes to things. They're more physical. And that's again, part of it is they have the luxury of being connected to their very hormonally stable bodies.
Yeah.
There's so many things that are stacked against us, and working holistically around that, as it's called, mismatched libido or whatever you want to name it, needs to look through all of these questions like how much do you work? What's going on for you? Do you have time and capacity to invite sexy thoughts inside your head? Do you know how your partner's sexual response is and how to take care of them so they can relax a little bit? And as you were saying, women want to sit down and take a break. Well, how can a man participate in her taking a break so that she can relax and drop into her sensual and sexual? That's my answer to what goes wrong with sex, for instance. And on the relationship level, what I'm seeing is dynamics, patterns of behavior, very much belief systems and structures and responses that are not helpful or healthy. And people are just trapped in a pattern that they see it. It happens again and again. They keep fighting about the dishes in the sink or, who's doing what, etc. But they don't recognize the deeper levels of it. What's a trauma response from the past that you feel overly sensitive about something? Maybe overly sensitive about injustice or disrespect to your time or whatever it is, and then you explode. So what is happening really on a deeper level? Where do you heal this to begin that more connected journey to your partner, to yourself? Break patterns as well, bad patterns.
That's what I always say, that we're always repeating patterns. If you're on the outside, it might feel like it's the other person, they're not doing their dishes properly, and so on, so on. Of course, 100%, that is what they're doing. But there's a part of you that's bringing that experience into existence. So, what is that bit? And how do you help your clients look at that? How do you help them identify patterns? How do you help them break out of patterns?
Oftentimes, for me to answer that question, I need to describe how I work. And I work in 3 levels. I work with the cognitive, which is the top level. It's like what is the stuff that you need to know? Because sometimes, or oftentimes, the reason why people don't do better is because they don't know any better. So what is it that's missing from your self-awareness or your partner awareness and abilities and whatever it is to kind of begin thinking, oh, I need to change XYZ here. Then once you have that awareness and that knowledge, we go down to the behavioral level. So what can you do on a behavioral level? Maybe it's you need to understand a better way of communicating with your partner and have better structure. Maybe you need to learn nonviolent communication or radical honesty. Which side do you need more of? And then there is the emotional, the third level, which is the deepest level that I go into, where we work with, well, what inside of you may be preventing you from stopping XYZ or doing differently, etc. And the way that I describe this process is through the analogy or comparison to someone smoking. It says it usually on the box that if you smoke, it will kill you and poison you and all of these things. So if knowledge alone helped, then there will be no need for me and you and majority of professionals out there, right? If knowledge itself worked, people would have read all the self-help books, implemented it, and boom, they have the perfect life. So that's the first thing. But when we have someone who is a smoker, they could be either behavioral, kind of like habitual smoker, or an emotional smoker. Because both of these people know that smoking is going to kill them. That educational piece is probably already done by the box that they're smoking from. The next is the habitual smoker. They probably smoke with their coffee in the morning, at the pub with their drink, or whatever it is. It's a habit, but they can quit it if you help them with some behavioral techniques like patches and whatever else. But then you have the emotional smoker. That's the third level that I work at. And it doesn't matter how much education you give them or behavioral strategies, they will continue to smoke and relapse and smoke and relapse if they ever stop. And that's because they're smoking for an emotional reason. Maybe they need to escape their toxic boss for like 5 minutes. And that's their way because they can't draw boundaries. They don't feel empowered to dare and look for another job or something else. They think that wherever I go, it will be the same thing or worse. And that might be one reason. So if we're to help someone stop smoking who is an emotional smoker, we need to be building their boundaries. We need to be building their self-esteem. We need to be helping on that deeper emotional level. Or it may be that they're really socially awkward and shy. So that's the only way that they can meet people at the pub, freezing their bum out, smoking and bitching about the weather. Maybe that's another thing. Maybe that's the confidence within ourselves, social skills, etc. That needs to be worked on so that the person can stop smoking and can strike a conversation with anyone anywhere.
You bring a really, really important aspect about sex in general. Because while we're talking about smoking, we're really talking about our sexual intimacy. Why are we doing that? What is the reason? What is it that drives us, right? And sex, as you were talking around the emotions, sex and emotions energetically, they're really tied with the second chakra. They're really tied with the sacral chakra. And the sacral chakra, as much as it's around sex, it is about reproduction, it's about life creation. The same force, literally the same energy in our body, is also used for our drive through life. So we call it the life force. So whatever passions, whatever things we want to create. So when this energy is balanced, so when someone's emotionally balanced, or when sex is a place where it's not because of lack, but it's more like, hey, it's normal. Like that center is not unbalanced. when sex is approached from a nice, happy, good place, that time you would find that the individuals, they're thriving in the rest of their life as well, because just that life boost is there for whatever they want to create. That place is really safe and good. So sex might be an emotional response where someone's going in because, well, they're feeling bad about something wrong happened with their boss, and so they go like, okay, this is my means of escape. But you can only escape to a certain point. One day you've got to face the music, you've got to come back to it. So I think you're doing really great work in terms of helping people emotionally. And what are some of the tips that you can leave for people? Because I think people will understand that, yes, I'm going here or this needs to stop. Like I've had clients who've just been addicted sometimes to sex or porn. Generally, what is the advice that you would give to them? Because sometimes they would realize they want to get away from the bad behavior. They want to get away from needing sex.
Again, in that kind of situation, it's a matter of coping. So I would say that this is a coping strategy for them, just as like smoking is for someone who is afraid of their boss or something. And a lot of the time, the way addiction specifically has been approached to anything has been like cold turkey, go cold turkey, do the 12 steps, or whatever. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but it's BS. Like, this does not work. Addiction or any kind of obsession with something or compulsivity around something has to do with what does this thing bring you? Why is this thing important for you to do? And how is it taking you away from what you're running away from, or healing you in that moment? Because if we look at it, like, social media is a great addiction
Addiction. Mhm.
itself, right? And what is it doing? It's allowing people to escape from, the shit show that sometimes life is. And is the same for any other addiction, be it sex or drugs or work or anything, really. It's about going in inquisitively and just asking yourself, which parts of me are being served when I do this? What am I getting out of this? And why is this my method of escaping? I would never say go cold turkey on love or sex or
No,
work.
totally,
Like,
because people are seeking some emotional validation. There's an emotional need. So you're literally taking it away. You're not solving the root cause at all. They were going there because there is a problem in the first place. So if you're just taking that
exactly.
away, you're not hitting the root cause of the problem. What is it that they need? You're not hitting that. So it just wouldn't work. There's just a matter of time. How long can you abstain? And then when do you come back to it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I would say to people. Make sure that on the path to the healing journey and during the healing journey, you work with people who understand what you're dealing with. And most mainstream therapists out there do not understand sex, do not understand relationships, because most of their training is around the mainstream plagues of society, anxiety, and depression. If you are on that kind of path right now, then I would definitely say seek sex and relationship professionals who can help you with this and specialize in this. And I would never, ever recommend people to work with someone who believes that once you're an addict, you're forever an addict, because this is so old school, so ancient as a belief. If I ever was to, I don't know, like, I'm a psychologist, I know people can heal, people can grow from an experience, people can move on from an addiction. Like, and I don't speak about this very often, but I went through workaholism. When I started my business, I was like, that's what it takes. I was hanging out with a lot of Americans in entrepreneur communities. The hustle culture was rubbing off of me. I also had a lot of like personal life challenges that year before I started my business. So I was still very much like hurt by a lot of things that happened. And I was like, well, F this and F that. I need to be my person and be independently reliant on myself. Because, one of the reasons why I left the NHS in the UK was because I got disillusioned. There was a lot of backstabbing, a lot of drama in the mental health. And I was like, how am I supposed to work with colleagues that are bonkers? Like my clients that come and see me are way better than my colleagues. It was such a difficult time, and I was very hurt, and that just put a lot of the conditions in a perfectly aligned order for me to fall into workaholism. And the fact that my dad was a workaholic his whole life. I used to call him out since I was like a child. And I thought, like, I'll never be like him, but monkey see, monkey do. Like father, like daughter. And that's the thing, like I've walked that path. It took me a few years to journey out of workaholism, but I no longer feel tempted to go and, work for 6 hours straight without a break when something difficult happens in my life. And that's exactly the definition of a cure, to not need to reach for that when shit hits the fan, to feel like, oh, I have a different way of dealing with this. And actually, I don't care for that old method. It doesn't serve me in that way. And I still love working and I'm still hardworking, but there's no compulsion around it anymore. There's no drive to work when I'm upset about something. And even terrible things have happened in the past, you know, how many years since I've been on that journey out of workaholism. And I'm still like, yeah. Sometimes I've felt like, oh gosh, I wish I was a workaholic right now. Because then I could go back and whack out so much of my work done. Like I'll be so productive. But it's gone. I've healed that part and time has tested me. And that's why I say to people, I would never recommend for you to go to a professional that would sell you that you need them for life and that is a condition for life and that once an addict, forever an addict. Utter BS.
Yeah, correct. And it just takes that healing. It just takes
Yes.
to understand the part. What is it? What is that inner part of you that needs to do that? So, whether it's workaholism, because I think a lot of the listeners will relate with that as well.
Mm.
So, whether we are workaholic, and I've been in that place as well, it's a lot around just a desire to prove. It's a lot around, hey, I need to prove, I need to earn my love, I need to earn my place. And there's that. And I think the moment, at least for me, I started doing like, okay, I'm fine, because it's just total acceptance. Like, I am fine. I don't need to prove, I don't need to do something else to
Mm.
be okay and to love myself. I can just start. Like, I am lovable right now. How I look and how I am is absolutely okay. But once you start with that total acceptance, you start healing those bits of you. And
Mm.
that's what the listeners can do as well. Like, just
Yeah.
start healing those little parts, even the little bits where they feel that they're lacking. What is it that they are getting out from either sex or whatever addiction? What is it that they're getting? They can just start giving it to themselves. Do you have tips for the listeners, like just one takeaway where you feel like everyone can love themselves more or just own themselves, be more connected with their bodies? And maybe if you want to split it out with men and women, that's absolutely okay. But what advice would you leave the listeners with?
If there's just one piece of advice, I would remind people, as one of my clients used to say a lot, you don't know what you don't know. And oftentimes you're too close to to yourself, to your life, to your patterns, to your partner to see the big picture. And that's why I always recommend, if you feel like life can be better, seek and engage a professional that matches the needs you have. Because if you don't, you may regret it, and that's the hardest thing I hear in my sessions with clients, that sense of regret. I have, even if you go and Google my name and read my reviews, what people say about working with me, again, they do speak about regret and wishing they have worked with me 10, 20 plus years ago. And that's the hardest part. I can listen to the hard stuff, I can listen to people's pain and struggle, and I can help them through it. But the hardest thing for me is hearing people genuinely like cry with regret about how much they've missed out on, how much pleasure, connection, how many relationships they have, you know, gone through that have failed or they sabotaged them or something that could have been avoided. They could have known themselves better. They could have built the skills that they wanted to be able to live the life that they deserve 20
So,
years
how can
ago.
people start? Like, even without going to a professional, is there something that you would say that they can start doing immediately in their houses, within their daily lives, just to connect with themselves?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I would say is like there are so many challenges that people can have about and around sex and relationships. Maybe it's post-pregnancy, maybe it's chronic illness, maybe it's aging and sexuality and relationships, maybe it's that they're interested in polyamory or BDSM or something. So there isn't one thing that I can give that's like specific and actionable aside from recommend a website called LifesExplicit where they can actually start searching for that kind of information. They can find articles on the topics they're interested or videos or podcasts or professionals that specialize in those topics because there are very few sex and relationship professionals specifically and we're very hard to find because of censorship online. If you've been on social media for like a minute, you have certainly heard how sex and relationship professionals change words in order to avoid, I
Getting
don't know, like
banned.
algorithms and getting banned and getting completely like wiped out overnight.
Which is such a shame because, as much as we need to talk about this positively, we also need to have platforms that allow us to do that. Like, there's a difference between people who are, sending out, spreading out the wrong messages and the people who are talking about it positively. There definitely needs to be a different way for them or space in the algorithm to allow that to come through. Because how is your voice supposed to be heard? And how is that supposed to go out in the world? But yeah.
Exactly. So if you're happy to share the link to Life's Explicit in the show notes, people can just go
Definitely.
and find the information they need because genuinely me having been in this industry for over 8 years now, I'm like it's such a struggle. I've had so many clients come to me and be like, it took us years to get to that point where we could actually find you because like they've gone through the NHS, which is the National Health Service in the UK. They got a cookie cutter type of approach from a professional working for the NHS. They struggled some more and then they finally were like, okay, let's find the right professional this time. And a lot of people get disillusioned. It leads to like heartbreak
Yeah, and
and
at the
people
same
give
time,
up.
it's such an intimate thing. It's so intrinsic. This is how we were born. Like there's no kidding around it. We were born this way, and then still we can't talk about it. But it holds the key to our emotions. Feeling sexually balanced is also a very integral part of just feeling really connected, really balanced every single place in us, within us. So, this is definitely a conversation that needs to happen a lot more. So, where can people find you? So, you've mentioned your website. How are the other ways that people can reach out to you?
I'm very easy to find online if you want to work with me or see my reviews before you decide or want to do a discovery call. The easiest thing to do is Google my name. If you Google Leah Spasova, you will find me everywhere, including on my website and including on Life's Explicit. I'm listed there alongside 100 plus professionals from around the world that can serve your needs, time zones, and so forth. That's the best way. Just Google me, find me, message me. Let's go from there.
Okay, beautiful. And I'll have all the links in the show notes as well. So, thanks, Leah, for being here. It was a pleasure having this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thanks to our dear listeners as well. I hope you enjoyed today's topic. If you feel there is anyone else who will benefit from this show, please feel free to share. Feel free to subscribe so that you will have access to other episodes and other really great speakers who will talk about other things that are very important to us, very integral to our daily life, and really help us transform into a better space. So, thanks so much. Signing off. See you next time.